All right, camera's on.
Worst things have happened.
You might want to say that again.
Do the
Just not got the
intro
camera going.
again. Okay. Can we get this mic on right?
Yes.
Sit in the hot seat.
There.
Yeah, warmed it up for you.
We got afraid they learn something. They got all the glimpse in here.
Well, today is the 24th of May, 2008. We're here at the Cultural Center at the Vandalia Gathering, and this is the first attempt to gather oral histories from the recipients of the Vandalia Award. We're very pleased to have Jane George and Frank George as our first victims, our first guests. Here is Jerry Milnes on the end, I'm John Lilly, and we don't know what we're doing here. We're just going to try to talk to you and get your story and answer any questions, maybe get you to play a tune or two, and just sort of take this as it comes.
I was wondering, maybe we could start by asking each of you separately what you know about your ancestors.
That takes a week or two.
Yeah.
Talk fast.
Frank, why don't you start there? What do you know about, how far can you go back and name ancestors in your family?
Well, in the Georgia, Greenbrier County, I go back about 5 or 6 generations, take them back to Stanton, Virginia, and up to Rappahannock County. But I don't know exactly when they came first. First George landed in Virginia in 1619, but the person I know agreed with George, but I can't connect my people with him. And then on the other side, the Germans, I got it back to 1395, but that's a hassle to go through the papers. They have from Pennsylvania, Valley, Pennsylvania, southwestern Germany, and some of the women folks was from Switzerland. I remember Zimmerman wife, it was Switzerland. So then on my mother's side, you got McGregors that came to Tennessee in 1675 or 80. And they dropped the changed the MAC to MC, and all kinds of things happened. That's probably where I got some of the music ability. And on that side there was Germans, Vipers, Tennessee Germans. I have no idea where they come from or when, except it's early. And of course, grandmother was Jackson, into Stonewall and Andrew Jackson, but it's not real close. The Georges are Welsh, of course, the Ellises are Welsh, the Schwab is Swope over here, Schwab over there are Germans. And there's O'Sullivans and McCoys, a few McCoys. And let's see, I mentioned Jackson, let's say O'Connors. And it's mostly Irish, then it gets a little bit of Scotch, and smidgen of German, and a lot of Welsh, so it's confusing to say the least.
Of those Germans, would you ever have happened to know what religion they were?
I'm told Schwab left because one reason he left was trouble in the church, but I don't know whether they were Lutheran or Reform, I have no idea, because they got over here, they went to the either Methodist or Presbyterian or didn't go. A lot of them didn't go to church.
Tell them how far you can go. That woman that sent you something from Florida goes through to the 1300s.
That's the Jim Swope side, and it goes back to Wolfhard,
Yeah.
but it goes back to 1395. That's the female one. And, you know, this is spreading pretty thin.
Now the Swopes, is that, you were raised near Swope Knobs, right?
Right, yeah, right at the base of, we lived there. No,
We live there.
I never up there, I lived there, yeah. That's the reason the name of it. He was the first white man in there, I think. He came to what's now Monroe County in 1751. He crossed over from what's now Allegheny County, I believe. Anyway, he came up Dunlap Creek and down Kitchen Creek, but they went the other way around. He crossed the divide, the Continental Divide, the water was here. And he walked into what's now Union, and he looked up and there was the knob, and he said, well, I'm going to keep going. He went around what's Wolf Creek. He made a brush pile or a hatchet sign or something. He claimed probably 2,000 or 3,000 acres, I don't know. later he went back to Pennsylvania, and then he came back. And, not too far back, was raised there around Wolf Creek. But somebody named it Swope's Knob, I don't know why. He's probably the first European to see him in the trouble.
Tell them about the little boy that went for water when he...
Oh, do you want that story? Well, Joseph Swope went for water in the spring. He was 5 years old, and a bunch of Shawnees captured him. A bunch of Shawnees captured him and took him back to Ohio. I think it was the Pickaway Plains in that country there. So, later on, when he was 14, 9 years later, they made a trade. Some old squaw took a liking to him and kind of raised him. But he was traded back. I don't know how he got back, but they brought him. Anyway, he got back to Wolf Creek, and he lived out a pretty good life up into his 80s, and he never spoke a word of English. He spoke fluent German and fluent Shawnee, but he never learned English. He couldn't sign his name. I have a copy of a will. It just had a little scribble where his name was. And they became very good frontier people. These were like the long hunters and the buckskinners. And of course they were adept at defense and all, and kind of kept the frontier open. They fought the Indians, but tried to avoid it. And there wasn't too much Indian trouble in that country there. Sporadic raids.
That's Monroe County. Monroe County.
What's now Monroe. But they just came in for raids, you know. I don't think it was a real big problem. My great-grandmother on the Ellis is over at Choctaw. I can still say a few things in Choctaw, but when I'm gone, it's gone.
How's that again? How was that again?
Actually, I can say a few things. I can count for you in Choctaw. Bureau, Nero, Sepo, Catamo, Wrongful, Been, Bimini, K-Walk, Walk, Sugar. And when I'm gone, that's gone. Unless you want to write it down for that.
He said it like he had been raised, but that's not true, he just learned that.
Yeah, but it's, you know, that's a minor thing. It's about as much Indian in him as the German.
So
But everybody's got this awful amount.
You haven't talked about the Owenbys, Frank.
Well, how long were we going to say?
I don't know.
When my mother was in Owenville, I'm from Tennessee, and the Owenbys came over from North Carolina before there was a Tennessee, because I've seen a tax ticket to King George III paid in shillings and pence, and the address is something county, North Carolina.
Bedford, wasn't it?
Bedford County, North
Yeah.
Carolina, and it is now Marshall County, Tennessee, because North Carolina went all the way to Mississippi, and they kept carving the counties out, you see. But anyway, they came from northeastern Carolina, and I don't know where they landed, but it was back, some of these people got there before 1700. They really broke the ground as far as the frontier was concerned. And a lot of them, several of them were rifle makers, blacksmiths and rifle makers. You had to be able to fix your rifle in those days, or you didn't live very long. And some they went on, some of them stayed in Tennessee, some went to Texas, and I corresponded with one in California one time. I think he was just half. But they were strung out all the way from Virginia and Carolina to the West Coast. They keep going west. And I don't know what they were. If it was OWN, I'd know they were Welsh. But this is OWNBY. And the BY is a Viking ending for farm, village, depending on what happens in the area. And so I don't know if it could have been Vikings landed naming or what. I cannot think about it so far. But in Tennessee, they're plentiful. In fact, Big Brother Oswald's mother was the one that got him there. What was his name? I didn't know his father's name. Anyway, his mother was the one. I got to talk to him one night, just happened to bring that up, because he never talked language. But that's no claim to fame, as far as I'm concerned.
Jane, how about your
You want me to
ancestors?
talk? Well, I am a tailor, and there's lots of that thing. You don't find many on very many Georges, but boy, the tailors were everywhere. But I want to say one more thing about Frank, because he won't tell you this, but I'm going to tell you. His mother had a great big old-fashioned piano, and she could play it. He says she played mechanically. She learned by paper trained, like Melvin said, you remember one night. But when he was 4 years old, of course they had a radio in the house, you know, and he listened to it and remembered tunes. So he got up on the piano or stool and picked out a tune when he was 4. And that was the beginning of a musical, well, whatever you would say, a musical life. That's what it was.
Well, that's lucky see, lucky do.
That never stopped. It hasn't stopped yet. I was born in Roane County, West Virginia, up a holler, Possum Holler, at home. I am truly a hillbilly.
Bear pork and take it on.
And,
What's the turn on? Bear pork, and then turn left.
yeah, and then you up Possum Holler.
Possum Holler.
And it was as far as you could go. The water came down off the hill, and if you walk up the top and down, you were in another valley. Anyway, my father was always very interested in his history. Somehow or other, Frank and I both have been more than average interested in our lifestyle and the kind of things that happened to us as we grew up. Dad's father disappeared when he was 4 years old, and before his youngest sister was born, and they spent their whole life trying to find out what happened to him. And a couple of years ago, we finally did know where he was buried and what had happened, and we had a weekend that was just wonderful with the Taylors coming from all over the country, and we marked his grave and got to know one another. One of my cousins printed this all up in a book that is truly wonderful. The other two names in my dad's side were Harbor and Hunt. And at one time, their post office was Cicerone, which is right on the Kanawha County border. But they decided to have Dad and his uncle started a Hunt Harper Taylor reunion there. And it was a great big thing for a long time. And when we moved to Walton, where we live now, and I went to the grocery store, went to the bank, people would say to me, oh, I know you, you're Ray Taylor's daughter. And that was the truth. And he was well known. And my mother was a love. And now these Hunts, Harpers, and Taylors came from southwestern Virginia, north, and settled in the part of West Virginia that was settled last. The land was the last part that was settled, as far as I know.
Indians wouldn't have it.
Frank said, why would they leave that beautiful LA, Virginia, to come up here? And I don't know, but it was right preceding the Civil War,
Most of them were criminals, weren't they?
around 1820 to 40 or
They
something.
were everything from criminals to college presidents. They had covered.
Yeah, we had a good variety. That's true. You can find tailors of all persuasions. And the Lowe's came from Monroe County, basically the same area that Frank's folks lived in, except it was southern Monroe. And
Monroe was really hard.
How do you spell that?
Lowe. And most people put the E on, a few of them do not. And then there's around Clarksburg, Lough. Yes, lots of them. I don't know. I have traced the Lowe's, and they do belong to the MacLaren clan. They're a sect of that in Scotland. But they're probably in many other countries too. I don't know, except the Scottish history of it.
In Pelham County,
You see, the word, German word for lion is L-O-W-E-N. And everybody thinks, well, I'm Dutch, which still doesn't tell you anything.
in Pelham County, they spell it Lough, but they spell it Lough.
That's right.
They pronounce it Lough.
What county is it?
Pelham.
Well, there's up around Harrison and Marion, yes. I know some of them. And then my grandmother, on my mother's side, was a Senate. Senate is very Irish. They live in County Wexford, I believe, at Boulevard. And we have been there. And one time we were on a trip to Ireland. Frank and I traveled a lot, and in the things we've done, and we always took kids with us. Anyway, we went to the Flocchio, which is Irish music gathering, for finals in all these instruments that they play in competition. And there was a Patrick Senate there, and that's the name of the great or whatever grandfather that, that we knew about first. And they lived on Round in Roane County. And, well, there's too much to tell of the history of my family, except we won't get to anything else. But the Hunts, Harpers, and Taylors live all around us now. I'm down there where my dad was born.
And the Patricks.
And Patrick's, yeah.
And Bishops. Well, I mean,
And who?
Bishops. No, they left.
Well, yeah, we have a lot of history. Frank and I both have genealogy that you wouldn't believe because we've been interested in
Let's
it.
have something about Patrick Center. A young man sitting right around the corner of this stone wall, masonry wall. I heard pipe, the Irish pipe. I walked around there, sitting there on his case, playing. And his left hand, Kithog being Gaelic. Kithog means left hand. And I spoke to him after he stopped. And he was trying to get tuned to compete, I said, and who are you? He said, I'm Patrick Senate. I said, interesting. My wife's great-granddaddy's Patrick Senate. I said, are you from Boulevard and Wexford? He said, yes. How do you know that? Things like that.
We remember a lot of details and things that were interesting. And by the way, Boulevard in County Wexford, it is the village that the Kennedys came from, or if it's not the right one, it's next door to theirs. It's very close. That's where we're from. And I grew up in Roane County and went to school there, and I did a lot of work in preservation of crafts. We really, an awful lot of what you all work at, and we had work at, began in 1963 when West Virginia Centennial Year was celebrated. And it sort of sparked a lot of interest and new things to happen. And one of the things I did was travel around the state for the Department of Commerce. It was a technical assistance program for craftsmen. And I got to know an awful lot of people and see most of the state. And that was a great experience. Of course, my dad was interested in his sisters and brothers and the genealogy, and Frank and I have that in common. We also have a lot of traditional music in common, although I did not play any of the string music or anything. I know the words to most of the well-known fiddle tunes. We used to sing them when I went to 4-H camp when I was a kid. We sang the tunes.
You're hard to fool on the song, but they're not Old Joe Clark or Sally Good, not that.
They're not all fiddle tunes have words.
I want to say something here. I'm from West by God, Virginia. I always say that because people think I'm from Virginia lots of times. I'm from Mercer County. Mercer County provided more soldiers for the Confederate Army than any other county in the entire Confederacy. That's my claim to it.
My mother and father were both teachers. My dad was the county superintendent of schools in Roane County when the county unit system began, and he was a very busy superintendent for that reason, because before that time it was district schools, and I actually went to one of those one-room schools in the community that we lived in when we left the hall when I was 4 years old and moved over on the hard road because he had to walk out of there in the wintertime to go to work. And so I grew up at Speed, and it's called that because, here's another little incident. When the first post office was established in that area, Mr. Watson had it at his home, and the department in Washington or somewhere wrote and asked for names of the post offices. And he wrote in a big, long, flowery name, as many others did, I'm sure. And they wrote back very curtly and said, "Can't you think of something shorter?" And he wrote Spud down. But he made his U like a double E, and it's been Speed ever since. How about that?
Jane, were your parents involved with traditional arts? Did they practice basket weaving or play traditional music?
Involved in what?
Folk arts at the home?
Oh, my mother sewed in what the way they call folk arts now, long before there was a cultural center or any of this. However, she was a teacher, and her main thing, she did participate in the programs from this place after quilts. She made quilts, but she wasn't known for that. She was known as a toy maker. And when they had these regional arts and crafts centers for a while, Roane County was in the one that was centered at Parkersburg, and she was the frog maker, and she made frogs, great big ones, mostly smaller, but she had done toys all of my life that I could remember. And after she retired as a teacher, she did many toys, and she sold hundreds of them. And in fact, they made them one year for the Republican National Convention, the Democratic National Convention. They made elephants and donkeys. And as far as I'm concerned, I always liked to dance. I wanted to do that for sure. And here Frank came along at that Cedar Lakes Fair, the West Virginia Art and Craft Fair, in 1966, right? I was on the board when that fair was established, and I worked real hard the early years, and I've been to most of them up until 1984. When I retired, I quit doing a lot of things. But here it was, and we used to have an opening dinner at that thing. And he walked in with this full regalia on. And our entertainment, this was the directors and the people that ran the thing, and played the pipes. And I was late for my beginning activity. I was supposed to be teaching the children's hymns that year, because I wanted to hear him play. And after that, there was nothing to do but get a bunch of kids dancing, and so he could play for them, and it worked. I've told a lot of dancers, but the man sitting in this front row over here probably taught more dancers in West Virginia than anybody ever has taught more young people to dance.
Let's talk about Rush Butcher. Hey Rush. Hey Ruby.
Both of you I can tell, have always been interested in genealogy. Did any of your ancestors before your generation have an interest in that, or did you have to really do all the research?
Oh,
Everyday life.
in Frank's family, it became very obvious to me that all the Ellerbys and all the Georges gave him their information. They didn't collect it for themselves, they gave it to Frank.
But it wasn't written down, it was just word of mouth, or was it?
Oh, yeah.
Mostly oral, there's very little written, like that old wheel, once somebody found something like that.
Well, if they had anything written, they gave it to him.
They didn't understand that this stuff should be passed.
Now, in my family, my dad and his sisters tried for most of their lives to find out what happened to their father. And that was the route that got us into genealogy so much. And it was all oral, but they got together a lot, had family reunions, and my mother's family visited the Ayers a lot. They stayed around close. The Taylors were spread a lot, different places than they are now. But you'd be surprised, in 2004, when we finally found out where John Emery Taylor was buried and what had happened to him, they came from all over the country to a celebration of that fact, and we unveiled a beautiful, I had a cousin who was a retired brigadier general in the Air Force, and he hadn't been home a lot like I had, or hadn't gone back a lot, kept in touch. And he was the one that wanted to do that, and it turned out to be a beautiful thing, because it culminated something for a whole lot of people.
Big tailors everywhere. I've never been anywhere in the U.S. or Canada or the British Isles that you can't find tailors. I didn't find any on the continent. I'd be surprised.
Now, tailor is obviously an occupational name.
Yeah.
But then there's the Harpers. And up in Randolph County, Pimlico County, the Harpers are German. But I wonder if there were Harpers originally, actually musicians.
I wonder that too.
No, Harpur has something to do with a geographical field of meadow or something.
And Hunt is
You would
derivation.
think would be a harp player, but not in
Hunt
this
is
case.
a shorter form of hunter.
Now, do you know if your Harper family, were they German people, or do you know?
Well, I don't know. See, I haven't, after we got into all this Scottish and Irish stuff, that was what I studied, and I have learned a great deal, and we've built up a pretty good library of it, and, you know,
There's a lot of them in Ireland. They spell it.
the Harpers that I know of were connected to the Buchanan clan in Scotland. Now, I don't know where my Harpers came from, except southwestern Virginia. The Hunts were connected to which clan, Frank? I can't remember. Anyway, I can wear 7 different tartans by clan affiliation, but I can't prove it beyond this country. And so I think that you will find over the world that some of these names are found in many of the countries. Don't you?
That's one of the benefits of the dance group. We got the kids interested in their family name.
That was the
And
other
so if they
thing.
wanted to make a kilt, not just any kilt, but try to find, what was Granny's name?
I remember the first time I ever saw you two was at the Ivydale Festival, and you had a table, and people could come up and give their name, and you would tell them what you knew about or could find out about their name.
I spent an awful lot of time reading those things. And Frank knew them to start with, so he didn't have to read. He spent his whole life studying Scottish, Irish music, and Appalachian in particular. Yes.
Hillbilly.
Yeah, Billy. Jim Comstock.
Hillbilly, no dog one.
Jim Comstock didn't like the term. No, Dr. Gaynor didn't like the term. He was the first collector of any, no.
Out here.
He said that a hillbilly was a good up on the side of the hill. But Jim Comstock defended the term and wrote about it. And so we are proud hillbillies.
But if you look at the word Billy in a Gaelic dictionary, it just says like friendly fellow. It doesn't.
Says what?
It's a friendly fellow.
Yeah.
It's not, it doesn't have any association with the goat.
Well, he said it was a goat up there on the side of the hill.
Well, that's a male goat, but I think it's a follower of William IV. Most of these people were Protestants, and they had recently been sided with the cause of the Protestant cause in Northern Ireland with them. And so they got over here, they lived in the hill, there's really mountains and some hills. So I think it's hillbilly meant somebody in the hills with Father and William.
Now,
Like Billy all over there.
I want to add a little bit here. Since there's been so many people doing genealogy, I have a great book, a big, thick book of tailors, and the woman that did it and her husband are from the very same place, southern Roane County, and I've known her all my life. And there's a lot of mistakes in it, but there's also a heck of a lot of information. But I never collected and wrote down things like this. It was all just talk until recent years, and now we just have loads of it written and pictures of old people. It's remarkable, right? How this is spreading. And my children know it because we've talked it and lived it so much.
Jane, I wanted to just clarify with the story you told her about 1966 at Cedar Lakes. When in 1966 you told a story a few minutes ago about how in 1966 at Cedar Lakes Frank played music Was that the first time that the two of you met?
Yes, we met at Cedar Lakes on the end of the bridge. He was sitting there playing music with David Morse. David introduced us.
That was my water bill.
I'll tell you what he said. He said, pretty soon after that, it was fake.
Fatal. And when were the two?
Just a little more fatal for me than him.
And what year were the two of you married?
Pardon me?
When did you get married?
Well, I met Frank, that was in '66 at Cedar Lakes, and we were married in '69 in December.
Yeah.
And believe this, we were on a trip.
I was going to go to Mexico, but I didn't think.
We were on a trip to southwestern Virginia with the dance group from Putnam County and some minister who had attended one of the workshops at WVU in the summer for ministers had invited us down there. We went down and did that. And while we were there, we got married. And so it was a terrible night. It was cold and snowy. And the people that drove back to Putnam County that night really had it rough drive.
Did you get married spur of the moment, or was this?
No,
She figured it out.
I had it all figured out.
You wouldn't have held the gun in my back. Jim Brown, man.
Oh, if you don't hush.
I was known to lie.
It was as much his idea as mine, folks. And let me tell you something else.
Sensual, man.
We have had wonderful times. We've had so many high moments. And I've learned, and I bet Rush Butcher would agree with this, that you can do an awful lot with young people if you can get to them. And of course the scouts and the 4-H organizations and things like that are how you reach a whole group of young people. And if you can look at a person and they show you something, a great interest in something, or they
Just get them interested.
speak of it maybe, and then you can point them down a road where they can get help on that, or you can tell somebody else to go to learn more, then you develop a person. I can name you a lot of them.
Just get rid of modern music.
That band is sitting right out there playing for the dancing right now are mostly Monroe County 4-H kids that learned to play music because of Frank George. And that's about it.
Well, I'm glad you brought that up. That's one point I wanted to get to. You are known nationally or internationally as a great person.
Oh, you know what? There's a man out in Roane County now that had a weekend, 3 or 4 weekends ago. He named it Frank and Jane Weekend. You know about it, because he told me to talk to you, Gerald. And he decided that that's going to happen every year. He's already put it on the web, and I have shared pictures and pictures and pictures. So look out, the world. I reckon it's going to go all over the world if somebody tunes to see him.
So this was at, what was the name of the camp? Sandyville? Where is this held? Gandyville.
It's near Gandyville, and it's Camp Shepherd. It's the Roane County 4-H camp.
What you all wound up doing with your life is what we know a lot about. Because you've been so prominent in West Virginia for doing the things you've done. But everybody's lives are shaped by their childhood. So
Say it again.
everyone's lives are shaped by their childhood to a certain
yeah.
extent. So maybe you can tell us your earliest memories about life. How old were you? Where were you? Describe where you lived and how you lived.
Well, you think a little bit, because I can tell you.
Thing back about my third birthday.
Third birthday.
Well, I was born in Bluefield, which is they call it a city, I call it a town. They call it a city because they say it's the highest city east of the Rockies, you know. Well, that cuts out 2 up there, you know.
Davis.
Whatever it is. Anyway, I was born there and was born, like my dad, born in one room called Coven, I was born in a hospital.
Now,
if I want to scratch, I'm going to.
Quit that.
We lived off the woods. You'd think it was very country, out in the woods. We're still in the corporation. So I had all this room to prowl. I had a little dog, and when I was 4 or 5, I started rabbit hunting. And my dad started me shooting a rifle when I was 5. And my mother said, "Why are you doing this?" Well, he says, when he goes out, he'll have to go to the army and fight a war. And so we're never responsible. Of course, everybody ought to do that. And then he got me interested in music. My mother played the piano note, and he tried to play the fiddle, and I don't think they ever got together. Even on and over him or something, which ought to be kind of easy to play. So anyway, he made me a fiddle, a homemade fiddle in the band. You may have seen him. And my granddaddy moved in with us when Grandma died, and so he played the band good. He was a good band player. He played the fiddle very good. My dad played both. He couldn't get him to do it for a stranger to save his own. He would not play for anybody else in the family. So Grandma got me started on this little band. I was about 7 or 8. I learned to play some tunes on it that you recognize. And then somewhere along later, a couple of years later, started on the fiddle. But I couldn't play the little thing was just a toy. You could play it, but it really wasn't worth fooling with. So I got started on Grandpa's fiddle. Here it is. It was bought in 1900, cost $6.50 with the bow and the case and the rose. It's a mail order, I guess here, but I don't know. Uncle Charlie,
With those tuners?
Grandpa put them. He said, "I can't tune with those pegs." And Uncle Charlie brought it home, you know. Of course, he couldn't play, so Grandpa did it. And various members of the family have kept it for a while, but I'm the only one that can play it, so I'll get it back. So that's early music. I played a little bit on the piano for around about 5. And then my mother made a great mistake. She decided I should have lessons. So I had to go.
He said I could already play music, so she
Miss Ella Holroyd, the only good thing about it was I had a wonderful teacher, Miss Ella Holroyd, in Concord College University. And she'd studied in Switzerland and all this stuff, but she couldn't comprehend my little music, you see. But she did find out I had a perfect pitch, because she'd go in around and get a note when I tell her what I was.
There's a good story about that.
I couldn't be away from that.
What is that? What's that?
You want me to tell you? Well, she took him to Miss Ella and enrolled him again. And the second or third time he went there, early in the time, he was waiting to take his lesson, and somebody else was having a lesson with Miss Ella. And he could hear her playing in there. And so when he went in there, he said to Miss Ella, "That girl was playing my tune, but she was playing it in a different key."
Well, that's easy to figure out.
Good story, isn't it? And, you know, as far as music is concerned, in my family, in the Taylors from Roane County, West Virginia, my line of Taylors were nearly all teachers. They somehow or other acquired teaching certificates, whatever way you could. Dad was really quite a good scholar. He pursued education all of his life until he got a degree from Alderson Broadus College at Philippi when my little brother was born and I was in high school. He kept doing it by mail, and then he finally had to go there and spend some time. And that shows you the kind of folks my line of Taylors were. However, there was this a whole bunch of them, you know, the brothers and sisters of my line, and Bobby Taylor's grandfather was one of them, and they nearly all played music. Bobby works at this place. You both know him quite well. Bobby is I think it's second or third cousin, something like that.
Hey Frank, everybody knows you as a fiddle player, and most often when they see you in public, you're with the fiddle. But I think you're the best banjo player in the state. Yes,
Agreed.
at least.
That's why.
Who were your influences? At least. Who were your influences there?
It's great.
Well, you see, there's several other people besides my family. friends, old man Gerald Williams and Henry Horton and Jim Farthing, I can name you 8 or 10 influenced on both ends. And my regret is the people now didn't hear what I heard. There's nobody way to preserve it. But one time we went to Jim Farthing's, and old man Jim, his father, played the banjo. Jim had the fiddle. My grandfather had a banjo. And one of Jim's boys played the guitar. And old man John Hopkins was there. It was kind of a little gathering. It was down at Brush Fork. It was several miles away from what we lived. But we had 6 or 8 musicians going. And I've always regretted it because it was one of the greatest sessions I've ever heard. And they kept swapping instruments. Jim would give somebody the fiddle, he'd take a banjo. I give it William there, he'd take the banjo, give it to him, take the fiddle. And John Hopkins couldn't play anything, but he danced. He's one of the best buck dancers you ever saw in your life. So was my grandfather. So was old man Jim Farthing. But there was always swapping around except the guitar. One Jim's son, you see.
So would you have any idea who influenced your grandfather
My grandfather?
musically?
You didn't answer his question. He asked who influenced you most. It was your grandfather on the banjo, wasn't
Well,
it?
he got me started, but see, all this other stuff was later. He died when I was 14, and then I picked up a lot of stuff in my teens and different people. But one of my greatest influences was Jim Farthing, who learned from his father-in-law, Hawley. It wasn't Jack Hawley, was his first name. Anyway, Hawley had learned from 2 Tazewell County men, Bill Gillespie and Newt Crockett, who was some relation to David Crockett. Then on the other side was Giles County, Virginia. Tazewell was this way, Giles was this way. And this is where my Gerald Williams came from. The Williams family was very musical. I learned tunes like Salt River and Liza Poor Gal and a few things, and he played banjo and fiddle. The interesting thing was most of these fiddlers played the banjo. Now, not all banjo players played the fiddle, but they did. Like Henry Reed and his kind would swap, you know. And it was amazing how they played those instruments.
And you know that it was amazing. I was never aware that the old-time musicians played more than one instrument until I met Frank and he began to play this and that and the other. And it seemed like he could play whatever he wanted to. There was music, some old-time music in the community I grew up in. The Wagner family had what you would call a band that they played at that time, and there were some others, but there wasn't a lot. And the tendency, of course, was to shut it down and go to the classical or the paper trade.
Henry Horton was a good banjo picker, so was old man Jim Farthing. Gilbert Williams' son, James, was a good banjo picker. And this was before the 3-finger stuff, you know. Well, they played, but I mean the pitch, you know. There was different style, 2 fingers. But the bluegrass sound was long. That was way ahead, you see. And so everybody used that old knocking, rapping thing, except a few 2-fingers. I know people that always played with 2-fingers.
You know, I know it was an old world thing. You never, for the most part, you either played music or you sang. Well, it was really rare. Would that be the case with the old timers you're talking about?
I rarely heard any musicians sing. People that sang, a lot of them wouldn't use a company, wouldn't even have a dulcimer in their guitar. Say, no, put them aside and sing their melodies.
I've never heard you sing a note of music. Do you sing at all?
Oh, I never.
He doesn't sing,
I used to do the.
but he can. He lives an awful lot.
I used to do that building stuff, you know, for tune or time or dance or something like that, but it's just nonsense.
When I first met Frank, Dennis Harrison, you probably both know him, was a young piper, and he used to come to our house all the time on weekends if we were at home. We had gone off to a festival or something. And Frank and Dennis taught one another many tunes, lilting, and that's what they did. Of course, Dennis had good voice, he could sing. I want to make some comment here about growing up. I have a sister who is not living anymore, who it was just barely a year older than I, and we were almost like twins. We were raised that way. And when we went home from school, we went outdoors and played. We didn't. Kids played in the outdoors. I never did live in town very much at all in my whole life. And you know, it was so healthy because Dad and Mom knew, because they were both teachers, that we need to stretch our legs and move around. We've been in school all day. And so we climbed the hills, and we climbed the trees, and we jumped the ditches. And we did one thing I've never known anybody else to do. We cut long poles, and we vaulted. We vaulted over ditches and everything we could find. And if you didn't get over, then you got to be the leader. But I don't know any other kids that ever did that. And
That's what you call it?
vaulting, yeah. And we just held to the sticks and jumped, and
And if you turned on the radio, there's lamplight in the valley for 21 years. You know,
Somebody with the guitar. Of course, we turned that on pretty quick. If I didn't, my granddad did. Everything you listen to is lumping down there.
well, if kids don't have a chance now. We got too darn many things that you can buy and that you play with. And we didn't have a lot of stuff like that. And we made our own entertainment, and I think we were much better off on account of it.
Frank, what other instruments do you play? We talked about your fiddling and your banjo playing. You play several other instruments as well, don't you?
I play at it, yes, it's jack of all trades and master of none. I can play the pluck dulcimer and
And a hammer dulcimer.
And
a flute. No, not flute.
I used to play flute and tin whistle a little bit.
In 1976, he played a fife a lot.
No.
Fife and drum.
I played a hog bagpipe, that's about it. Used to play old pump organ a little bit because I liked the sound of them real good, so I could play double tune on that. Most of them were not playable. People just let them sit in the house and the bellows rotted and the beads, if somebody pulled them through the blazers for fun, and then, you know, it was a problem.
You find many people backing up fiddle music with piano and organ? Was that very common?
You know.
I tell
Well, I've
you,
seen square dances where a piano joined in with fiddle band and guitar and maybe a mandolin show and then piano, a real band. Most people didn't play that kind of company.
Frank can play any instrument he tries, as long as I've known him. He doesn't play much at home anymore unless somebody comes to play with
Well, I've
him.
got a harp. I've been playing a few tunes on a harp. I'm trying to get into heaven, see? So
I was going to tell that.
Ash Grove, for instance, I can play that.
John Blazer brought him out one of his harps because he wasn't playing anything, and he just thought he might like to try it out. And he did, and he could play it, but he doesn't do it much.
Well, I don't know. I switch John Blazer's harp. Pretty good. It won't stay tuned, but you can tune it up long enough.
And of course, a harp is so beautiful when it's played.
There's not enough difference in the piano and the dulcimer and the harp to mount too much. That's the way you're looking at it.
When you were young and there was a lot of music in the family, did you ever go to dances and or play for dances?
Oh, Lord.
Can you describe what the dancing was like at that?
Well, yeah, we used to go over to Aunt Becky Jones's and have a dance, at least once a month. We tried to do something like every Saturday night because that was the time people had them all, you see. You didn't, by the time you worked, it was dark, so you had to watch your time. So we go over to Aunt Becky's and then that'd be Laney Horton playing the fiddle, Emery Horton playing the banjo, and Al Harnell playing the guitar. And I can't remember, they had a bunch of Melungeons down there in the hall that played everything. What was their name? Neil's maybe. And, let's see, I can't remember who else come on, but you'd have 4 or 5 musicians, and once they got tuned up, if you play one or two, then they'd have a square crowd on certain nights. call them buckets. Circle dance, it's what you see now, what the dawn are doing, you see most of the time.
Would this be in a house or a public school or what?
Sometimes in the yard, but you couldn't hear the music too good on the board, so it'd usually be in the house. So you'd have to have a big room or 2 rooms connected or something. Lots of times we'd sit in a wide door and play for 2 sets in 2 rooms, you see.
And would these people have a caller, or would they just know how to dance because they had learned the dance?
Oh, they just, sometimes they have a caller, lots of times they didn't have a caller. They had the motions memorized. And somebody may start, you know, and then they, once in a while, a strange thing, they call for a round dance, and that meant waltz.
Yeah.
So we have to come up, but nobody knew many waltzes, there's probably a dozen waltzes or 15, and they go back to square. You know, that was too, that wasn't bound for them.
But you know, but Frank told me when early in my acquaintanceship with him, that music was for dancing. I suppose that's why I got those 4-Hers together in Putnam County, and we did a lot of square dancing when I was growing up. We didn't do so much as probably they did in his community, because you see his family was so oriented toward it. He told me that when he was very little, his dad would put him on his shoulders and go wherever they were playing music on the weekend. And so he was immersed in music most of his life. And now,
Well, I've seen the kids asleep on the floor, but I was still there soaking it in. I admit that.
We just have another couple of minutes. Are there questions? Do any of you have questions for Jane and Frank? Anything you've always wanted to know from this amazing pair? No questions? Well, we have a few more minutes. Is there anything else that you all wanted to add that we haven't talked about?
I want Frank to tell you the first time he heard the bagpipes played. It's another good story.
Most of the banjos I saw when I was a child were fretless. Once in a while you'd see the supertone or something bought, you know, both banjos had frets.
I grew up in a most expected way. You know, we did singing and band and those things in high school, but we didn't have a lot of string music or kind that he grew up with in the community I lived in. But tell him about the first. I was absolutely stunned when I heard him play bagpipes. Tell him about the first time you heard him.
What do you think about those dances I went to? If there was any liquor around, I didn't know. I couldn't see it or see it. I thought that was a little bit unusual when I later on got out and wandered around, you know. I didn't see any.
Tell the story about when you heard the bagpipes.
I didn't take 30 minutes.
No, you don't have to tell him.
Okay,
That was short.
my parents and I were standing on the street corner, Bluefield Avenue and Land Street, talking to my great uncle. And all of a sudden,
Tell him how old you were.
I was 5, I hadn't started school.
Okay.
I hear this sound, 2 or 3 blocks down at the railway station, the big pole down at the end of the street. And I hear this sound, like a book, you know, and he started playing this thing, and I took off. I took off like a scalded hound, and Mother said, what's going on? But Dad said, don't bother, man, look. And they went on and talked a few minutes, then they walked on down. My dad knew where I was. And there was a Lipton Tea representative come in on the NW Railway. And he hawked a lot of buildings, hotel, restaurants, you know, and sold tea, scads. And he had this piper in full regalia to draw the crowd, you see. So they're down in front of the commercial hotel. And as soon as he blew up, I was gone. And if he was there playing, yeah, I'd still be snacking. But they were down, they probably played 3 or 4 sets, you know. 1 tune or maybe a set of 3 in 20 or 30 minutes, and then of course they took off. But that was my introduction to the...
And a lot of things have been written about his piping, or in his story about piping. But his mother told me he ordered his first set of pipes when he was about in his early teens. He was already playing a lot of music. And there wasn't anybody hardly at all ever played pipes here except the Outlands Islanders. And she said he uncased him, went in the bedroom, shut the door, and I don't know how long, much longer he came out playing the scale at least. And most people write about him, and they say when he went to the army in Europe, he learned from the British group that was ordered in. He thinks his mother exaggerated, maybe she did.
See, I didn't have any instructions. It's all on mom.
Well, we need to wrap it up, but thanks to Jane George and Frank George. Jane was the recipient of the Vandalia Award in 1993, is that correct? And Frank the next year?
No, 93.
93.
94.
93.
93 and 94.
And Frank in 1994. But thanks, Frank will be on the stage this evening. Thank you all very much. We'll be back at about half an hour with Nat Reese.